Hi, everybody. Happy Sunday. We're back here. We're going to do a bunch of reactions today. Um, what are we going to be doing? We're going to do some Tool. No, we're going to do some Pulsifer,
Yes.
right? Radiohead, Jeff Buckley,
Some Ryan Adams.
Ryan Adams,
A few other.
and a few other things. So, we're going through all the comments here, and so we're going to get to as many as we can today. But before we get started, um, I've been looking through the comments, and I do read through all the comments, and I saw a couple of comments that kind of stuck with me. Early on, I remember somebody saying, when I was saying the first time, probably one of our first videos, the first time I reacted to a Radiohead song, and somebody said, I can't believe you never heard this song before. You got to be putting me on. And I said, no, I haven't heard this song before. And a lot of people asked me, why? Where have you been? What have you been doing? And that was a good question. Those were definitely good questions. And I thought about it, and I felt like I really didn't have a good answer. I mean, my answer was, I was busy, raising a family and this and working and whatever, and didn't have a lot of time to listen. But even I knew that couldn't be the whole story. That just couldn't be the whole story. So that's been kind of mulling about in my head. And then there was another comment that came in, and I think it was one of the songs that I critiqued, not critiqued, but reacted to. And the person said, "This song, I can tell you, I don't have to know anything about music. This is crap." And I asked the person, I commented back, I said, "Well, what kind of music do you like?" And they told me, what kind of songs they liked. And I thought that was interesting because, at first blush, you might look at a comment like that and say, "Oh, well, I'm just going to disregard it." But I really wanted to pick at why, what was it that you didn't like about that particular song. Um, and then somebody sent a comment in that said, "Whatever happened to all the good music?" They were listening to a lot of the Radiohead stuff that I was doing, and a lot of the tunes from that time era. And they said, "Boy, those were great songs. Whatever happened to all the good music?" And those three things all came together, and it made me think. It answered the question of why I haven't heard Radiohead and a lot of these songs that I'm listening to now. So if you think about it, when you're growing up, you start listening to music, and some band, something turns you on and just lights you on fire. In my case, it was probably the Beatles. Before that, music was just, there was always music in my house. My parents listened to music, Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin. My mother listened to Broadway shows, soundtracks, and stuff. And I always liked listening to it, but it never I never thought it was something that I wanted to do until I saw the Beatles. And I looked at them and I said, well, that's something I can do. They're playing guitars, they're playing bass. Those things are, accessible to us. We can pick these things up and we can play these things. And I started listening to that music, and in that era, it was all the British invasion bands, and then we started getting into the progressive rock stuff, and then you got into like the country stuff, Doobie Brothers, Allman Brothers, and all that music was really great. And I think when you're listening to music at that age, it really imprints on you, and it becomes a part of who you are. And I guess maybe around the late 70s into the 80s, we started getting the new wave stuff. And my first thought was, it's quirky, it's weird, and it's kind of fun. I was playing out in a lot of clubs and everything during those times, and those tunes were kind of fun to play because everybody was into them. And then there was punk, and it was like, that doesn't appeal to me. Um, there were all sorts of like different things that were coming on, but there were still bands like the Spin Doctors and the Georgia Satellites, so there was still music that was accessible to what I thought good music was. And truthfully, as a lot of this new wave stuff started and a lot of the punk started, I didn't hear it. I mean, yeah, it might have been playing, but it didn't resonate with me, and it was nothing that I was interested in. And if you think about the comment that the person made about what happened to all the good music, it seems to be a phenomenon that a lot of us, I would think everybody goes through. I mean, look at my parents. When I was listening to the Beatles and all the stuff I was listening to in the 60s, 70s, and whatever, they thought it was crap. They just thought, I remember my father saying, you can't even understand the lyrics. What are they saying? And it was in code, Dad. It's only for teenagers. It's not for old people. But they didn't hear it. They couldn't hear the music, and it's like it falls on deaf ears. So I think that's what happened to me into the 90s and into the 2000s. Yeah, there was probably Radiohead songs playing here and there, or Soundgarden. There were Alice in Chains. It didn't resonate with me. It didn't have. I didn't recognize it. I just didn't recognize it, and in a lot of ways, it sounded inferior. And again, I'm not saying that it is. I'm saying that it's a phenomenon that most people have. And if you think about your own preference for music, especially a lot of you that are liking the reactions that I'm doing, you grew up with that music and you're thinking, this is great stuff. What's going on now? It's music sucks. Music's terrible. So it's an interesting phenomenon. However, that phenomenon now lets me revisit these songs that I did not hear in the past with no preconceived notion as to what constitutes good music. In other words, I'm not listening to it. It doesn't have to sound like a song that I grew up with. And so I can hear these songs where probably in the 90s I just completely dismissed them. So I think that's an interesting phenomenon. And I saw, as I've been mulling about these ideas this week, I saw, as I was going through YouTube, Rick Beato has something about why music sucks or something. Okay, so I purposely did not watch that because I don't want to be rechanneling any thoughts or ideas that he may have come up. But I do want to watch it after I'm done with this, because I have a feeling that in some ways we may be hitting on some of the same topics. I think he'll probably go more into the fact that music is much simpler. And to that note, when I started in college studying music, I remember one of my professors telling me that at that point, it was rock and roll was in full swing, and he talked about how he came from the big band era, and how music these days is just stripped down to the rhythm section. And I thought that was really interesting. He's like, you don't need the horns, you don't need the strings, you just need the rhythm section. You need the drummer, you need the bass player, you need the guitar player, and somebody singing. It was right down to bare bones. And that was a really astute observation. And when you think about it, I think music in some ways is still following that same trajectory, because now you have rap music and you don't even need the guitar and the bass and the drums. You just have interesting noise, which could be sampled, which could be played, whatever, and just sometimes just vocalizing on top of it, and a lot of times not even melodic singing, just rapping on top of it. So right there, it's stripped down to its bare bones, So interesting. So I think every generation has its own music, and when the next generation comes along and discovers their own sound, it becomes unrecognizable to the generation before them. And I think that's the phenomenon here. So to answer the question of what happened to all the good music, well, you're not hearing a lot of it, and you're judging it through the lens of your own experience. The other comment that said, well, this is crap. Well, you know what? I kind of felt the same way about stuff when I was listening to it, and go, it's just simple and weird, and it doesn't make any sense melodically, and what the heck is this? And just dismissed it without really giving it a listen, which luckily I'm able to do that now and really appreciate these tunes and hear them the way they were meant to be heard. And also, when you think about, how my parents couldn't hear my music. So, I think that answers a question on where have I been the past few decades? I've been here and I've been listening, but I just wasn't in a situation where I was hearing anything that really piqued my interest, because again, I was listening through the lens, listening through the ears of my youth, and so I'm not doing that now. I am, fortunately, quite a few miles away from my youth, even though I still act like I'm 15 years old. So I'm listening to these songs really fresh. So I think that's the phenomenon that we're dealing with here. So I'm glad to be here with fresh ears, listening to all this music again. So thank you. Keep those comments coming. Keep those suggestions coming, and this is great. I'm having a great time. Oh, by the way, yeah, 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 yeah. I plan to have this on everything I own at some point. So, so anyway, guys, thank you very much, and we're gonna start getting to the reactions now. So we got some coming your way. See you in a bit.